Hi, everyone. I am Tamara, and I am a licensed therapist and coach with over 20 years of experience. And I have a real passion for talking about the things that often go unsaid. Up until now, I've been writing a weekly advice column in my local community paper. And the response that I got from that was really overwhelming. I really just started the article as a place to express my thoughts, and I didn't realize how many people would connect to it. The response that I got was like, thank you for being raw. Thank you for being vulnerable and talking about things that we don't often talk about, such as grief. My mom died at a really young age, and it was really hard to navigate that. I needed to figure out a place to put my thoughts in. And so I just started to write about grief. I have an older father and I have a toddler. And being in that sandwich place, being in that in-between place is also a really hard place to be. It's extremely challenging to try to be the everything person. I got married at a really young age, and dealing with my relationship was also really challenging. Figuring out things at a really young age, navigating those hardships, dealing with the fact that you may feel really disconnected from your partner, even after a number of years of being married, dealing with the fact that you may hurt each other. And there'll be issues of trust and all those types of things that are really hard in relationships. So just a little bit more about me. I got married at 19 after dating my husband for only 2 weeks. Yes, I said that right. Not 2 years, not 2 months, just 2 weeks. And now we've been married for 23 years. So as you can imagine, getting married that young comes with its own set of challenges, and it hasn't been smooth sailing, for sure not. So you may be asking, how can I get married to somebody after only knowing them for 2 weeks? It's pretty crazy. So a little bit about me. I am a proud member of the Orthodox Jewish community, in which getting married at that age is actually the norm. Getting married after 2 weeks, getting engaged after 2 weeks is not really the typical, but we did it a little bit faster than usual. But it's still pretty crazy when I look back at it. So while I do love the Orthodox world really deeply, there are so many things that just go unspoken that people both in and outside of the community can relate to. I am also a mother of 4 children, ranging from the age of 2 to 22. Peppered in there is a 17-year-old boy and an 11-year-old girl. So I run the gamut of every single age group, from toddler to adult. My 22-year-old is also now married. She's been married for about a year and a half, and she got married at a similar age to when I get married, which is the norm in the Jewish community. So that's a really big age gap. I get it. So my mission with this podcast is to have the hard conversations and actually ask the questions that so many of us were taught to avoid. I want to talk about so many things. I want to talk about body image, which played a huge part in my personal life. I want to talk about my weight loss journey and what weight loss means, is specifically in the Orthodox Jewish community, how there is so much pressure, and how that impacts a person, how that also impacts our career, it impacts our relationships. It really impacts every aspect of our lives. I want to talk about anxiety and how we refuse to acknowledge mental health. It's definitely gotten a lot better. I've seen it in my practice over the years, but anxiety plays such a huge effect onto everyone's lives that suffers from it. It could be debilitating. I have family members that have anxiety. I have so many clients that have anxiety, and I see how it really affects their daily life. I want to talk about trauma and how that looks very different than what we were taught it would be. Where we talk about trauma as if it's something that's really, really big and scary, but not always does trauma play out in that type of way. So I want to be that friend that you're able to open up to. And know that you'll never be judged. I feel like specifically in my community and in other communities as well, there's just so much judgment that comes from all these different issues, whether it's our body image, whether it's the mental health challenges that we have, relationship issues that we have. There's so much judgment that's around it. And I really just want to be that person that you can come to listen to hear without feeling judged. So buckle in, guys, and get ready because this is going to be amazing. So because I grew up Orthodox Jewish, it impacts the way that I live my life. It affects my relationships, it affects my parenthood, it affects my my family and everything in between. So if you grew up Orthodox Jewish or just even in a really religious community, you likely understand where I'm coming from. If that isn't the case, then I really want to share with you what growing up in this community was like for me. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was what is the difference between being Jewish and being Orthodox? So being Jewish is just kind of something that you're born into. You are Jewish. If your mother is Jewish and you were born, then you are technically Jewish. If you are Orthodox, it really means that you follow a whole list of rules that other people who are just Jewish don't usually follow. So there's a whole number of rules that we follow, and I'm only going to go into some of them. But I wanted to explain that the difference between being Orthodox and Jewish is we are told to kind of just not ask the questions. We're told to just do. From a really young age, we are given these set of rules, and we're really told to not ask the questions. And we're also told that the more that you do it, the more you'll believe it and the more that you'll love it. That really wasn't the case for me. Asking questions was really discouraged. And this was something that was super hard for me because I'm a person that learns by asking questions. And the more I asked questions, I was told I'm too different. I'm told, threatened to get kicked out of school because I'm asking these questions, because I wanted to do things differently. So it was really hard for me. Just kind of believing things was a very hard place for me to be. For example, one of the things that we're told to just do is dress modestly. There are very different levels of people that dress modestly. The highest level, I guess, is wearing skirts. We don't wear pants. So as you can see, I'm wearing a skirt. We need to cover our elbows. We need to cover our knees. And these are things that they're not really given a real explanation of why we have to do these things. It was just told, this is what you have to do. And if you didn't do it, and if you dress differently, then you are ostracized really from your community, or you're labeled strange, or you're labeled a rebel, or you're labeled weird. So these were often things that I questioned personally. I was like, well, why do I have to cover my elbows? Like, what does an elbow have to do with anything? Why do I have to cover my knees? Why can't I wear pants? Isn't that more modest than actually wearing a shorter skirt is to wear long pants? So the answer that I just kept getting over and over was, the more you do it, the more you cover your elbows, the more you cover your knees, you're going to learn to love it. That was not the case. That was really not the case for me. I did it because, not necessarily because I believe in it, but because I didn't want to be ostracized from my community. I didn't want to be known as the rebel. I kind of wanted to fit in and not be the weird one. But as the years went on, I definitely challenged those things, not to the extent where I would all of a sudden put on a pair of jeans, but I, would move the needle like a little bit, and I was still labeled a lot as weird, different, just somebody that is acting out of what is normal in our society. Another thing that is different in our community is that there is a huge separation between genders. I went to an all-girls high school and school for my entire life. I did not have any interaction with the other sex, did not have boyfriends. It is not the norm to have boyfriends. The only time that you have interaction with the other sex is when you're ready to date in order to get married. You don't date just to have fun. You don't have long-term boyfriends. You date with the intention of you're either marrying this person or you're not marrying this person. So you would go out on like a few dates. You would decide if, this is the guy that you want to spend the rest of your life with, or it's not, and you would just date the next person. Usually you were set up, not all the time, but usually you are set up with this person. So a lot of times there are like resumes that are given, and on the resume there is information about you, about your family, about schools that you went to, about friends. So you're being judged from this piece of paper. They don't know you at all, and these matchmakers will match you up with a person that seems best suited for you. Sometimes people do meet on their own, but it's more rare in our community. At weddings, you don't sit together. You sit separately. Even when you're married, when you go to a wedding, you are sitting on the women's side or on the men's side. You are definitely not talking to your parents about taboo topics such as intimacy. So there was no talk about sex. There was no talk about anything that had to do with intimacy before you got married. So it was kind of just like figure it out for yourself. So my first real relationship with the other sex was with my husband. Now, I dated him for 2 weeks. We were engaged for about 5 months. And then you got married at 19. And you kind of go into this relationship with a person that you never lived with before, that is the opposite sex, that has different habits, that has different expectations. Everything's different. And you're thrown into this. You're thrown into being married. You're thrown into living with another person. And you have to kind of adjust to all these things really, really quickly. And this is at an age, like, again, I got married at 19, and it's at an age when most people who are not Orthodox really just are going to college, they're figuring themselves out, they're exploring the world, and here we are, we're getting married, we have all these real responsibilities at a really young age, and we have to figure things out on our own. We have no premarital education. Now it's becoming a little bit more common that engaged couples go for premarital counseling to deal with some issues that they have. But honestly, do we even really know what issues to discuss if you're not living with the person, if you don't really know the person all that well? And so you're sitting in a therapy session thinking about things that may happen in the future, but that you don't know because you haven't really experienced it with this other person. So these are things that are kind of like really just figuring it out as you go along. Another thing that is a huge tradition in our community is taking your daughter lingerie shopping for the night of the wedding. Now, I actually didn't have this. My mom did not take me lingerie shopping. I actually went to the Gap and I bought some silky kind of pajamas. And I didn't know anything about how to be a wife, about how to be a good wife. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I went to Barnes & Noble. I bought some books. Again, there was no internet at that stage. I was also the first person, the first one of my friend group to get married. So I didn't have anybody to really ask, hey, what does that look like? What does the first night look like? It's a good thing that I am a personality of being a little bit naive and go with the flow, that I was like, okay, we'll figure it out. But there were so many challenges that I see personally with my clients that they've had from kind of going from 0 to 100 and not knowing anything and not having that education before. It's really common for people to get pregnant on their wedding night because birth control is not something that's really accepted in our community. It's something that you have to go to a rabbi to kind of get that permission to get the birth control, and you have to have a reason of why you want to be on birth control. Some people listen, some people don't, but I've had many friends who have gotten married, who have gotten pregnant either the night of the wedding or the first month that they got married or even 2 months after, and they're on their honeymoon and they're nauseous. And they don't even have time to be a couple. They don't have time. They kind of get thrown into being married, pregnant, all the symptoms that come with it. And we're just supposed to pretend like we are okay with all of this, right? We're just supposed to be okay with all the changes that are happening at the exact same time, that everything happens just all at once. I actually remember my first year of being married. I got up at 3 a.m. once, and my husband was not there. And I called him and I'm like, "Where are you?" And he was upstairs in another apartment playing PlayStation with his friends. Now, let's remember, he's only 21. I'm 19. I have no idea what in the world I am doing. And I was like, "No, you are a husband now. You need to come downstairs and you need to be in bed with me." And honestly, I had no idea what I was even saying. And he was like, "Well, why can't I just play with my friends?" And we were just figuring this all out together. So there is something really nice about growing up together. I will say that, like, you kind of just learn things you learn things together as a couple that you wouldn't necessarily have when you're older. So there's something nice to that. There's something also really nice to being young parents and figuring that out on their own. But there's also so many challenges that come with that as well. And there's this thing in our community is that we just have to really believe in God, right? Believe in that everything that God does is for the best, and that everything is good, and that we should just be grateful for what we have. So when you're newly married, there's a lot of people that come up to you and it's like, "Oh, how's married life?" And you always just need to say that it's good. It's good because we're grateful for the fact that we got married young, and that we are, that we have a nice husband, and that we have an apartment, and just be grateful for all the good things that you have in your life. And yeah, we should be grateful, but what about the times that things are just really hard and that people are not saying that? They're not being open, they're not being honest about, yeah, this is a really challenging time. The first year of marriage honestly sucks. It is so hard. We are so young. We're really getting thrown into things at such a young age, and just kind of like figuring each other out and figuring yourselves out at the same time is really a challenging place to be. So when people would ask me, I remember like the first year that I got married, and people would be like, "So how's married life?" And, my answer was always like, "Yeah, it's great. It's great." But really, it's really hard. And the only person I think I was able to say that to, and not even, was my mother, because I didn't want to get her nervous that like things are not good and things are hard. But otherwise you just have to tell people like things are great. And nobody was really being open and honest about what's going on behind the scenes. So I made it my mission to talk more openly about relationships. It's kind of really why I went into specializing in couples therapy, is because I realized that there were so many challenges in my own personal life that I wanted to be able to help others deal with the same type of challenges. So the same thing like with my advice column that I do weekly is I talk about the things that people don't like to talk about, that are not so much taboo, but just people are not being real and open and honest about what is going on for them in all facets of their life, not only their relationships, but their career, their financial stress, their anxiety. There's just so much pressure in today's day and age that people want to brush things under the rug because it's easier to not deal with things than to talk about it. But one of the responses that I got when I did my column was people are like, thank you for being honest. Thank you for being vulnerable and raw. They're like, we never saw that in this community. People are just fake. They are not really saying the things that are on their mind. So I want to normalize this. I want to make this my mission with this podcast, that I know that I'm not the only person who thinks like this or wants to ask these kinds of questions. So I want to let you guys know that if you've ever thought about these things, you're not alone. And I want to reiterate that I'm not putting down the religion. There are so many beautiful things about being Orthodox. It is such a beautiful community to be a part of. There's so much emphasis on family and on love and on faith. And there's so many beautiful things, but there's also things that are hard. And there are also things that people don't talk about. And they're kind of just not saying it like it is for fear of judgment, for fear of shame. And so I want to create this space to have these open and honest conversations without the judgments. So some topics that I plan to cover is body image. I really want to talk about this. This is such a huge part of my life. That we will get into, and it's such a huge part, I think, of Western culture in general, but specifically in the Orthodox community, there is a huge pressure to be thin. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about anxiety. I want to talk about how that really affects, everyday life, and how it's not talked about as much. I want to talk about trauma. I want to talk about relationships, communication, like communication with your husband, communication with friends, communication about just being real with who you are. Another thing that I really want to talk about is prayer. Prayer in the Orthodox Jewish community is so prevalent. It's something that we do every single day of our lives, and not everybody connects to it. So are there other ways to connect to God that is not through prayer? And that is something that I really want to talk about, because I think that there's so much judgment around the fact that if you don't connect to specifically reading from a book or from something that you don't like necessarily attract yourselves to, then what else are you supposed to connect with? How else are you supposed to connect with God if not through that? So to stay connected to me, you can find me on Instagram at Talk to Tamara. Make sure that you're subscribed on your podcast platform of choice. And if you're looking for one-on-one support, you can visit my website at www.tamaragestetner.com.